budget workshop. I'm calling the meeting to order, which is agenda item number 1. Agenda item number 2, review the following cost center categories. And we're starting with Article 7, school admin.
Good evening. Can we go over the budget goals first, just one more time? So just as a reminder, all of our budget requests are tying back to these 3 budget goals. The first one being providing meaningful, intentional, and sustainable professional development. Number 2 is addressing equity in the opportunity gap. And number 3 is providing improved instruction through social and emotional learning and a multi-tiered system of support that is universal across LPS. And we are going to talk about Article 7. Article 7 is comprised of the Office of the Principal, and that's district-wide. The overall increase to Office of the Principal is $702,973, or 23.18% increase. The cost drivers for this article, we added a Farwell assistant principal. We added some administrative support at Connors. We reallocated those 2 assistant principals that we had talked about. That's one of the biggest drivers in this. From Montello and LMS, we have health insurance increases, and a new request in Article 7 is an athletic director administrative assistant at the high school. And we will take questions.
Can you remind us which budget the 2 assistant principals for Montello and LMS were in before?
ELL.
And do we have context for how that happened in the past?
I can't answer that. I don't know what our predecessors were thinking on that, so I don't.
I see Mr. Fuller in the audience. Could you come up and talk to us a little bit about what that position would do? What? So, I'm not going to make the comment I was going to make. Okay.
Good evening. We had put in our budget for this assistant position to expand programming. With more capacity, we would have more options. We now have, obviously, the high school facility, new fields, and also now the Longley facility in the gym there that Jason helps to manage. We think with all of that activity and an opportunity to grow and expand programming for students, intramurals, things of that nature, we cannot continue to ask Jason to take more onto his plate. He would never stand up here and say it. He's the best athletic director in the state of Maine, I believe that, and he works tirelessly for the kids in this community. And the expense that we have for him is minimal. We highly support this effort and really believe that it would have a positive impact on kids and their social well-being through many opportunities, like I said. But a plug that we'll make, and Jason would make it too if he's up here, he and I are both very passionate about adding volleyball to the high school from a perspective of Title IX and equity for gender opportunity. And also there's a growing population of students who want to be involved in that. And in the state of Maine, it's actually growing quickly. He could probably answer more questions any further than that.
This might not be a question for Jake, but maybe the superintendent. Are we doing anything about middle school athletic director position? Okay, that's what I thought we did. Okay, so I'm just curious what the difference is in the positions in the articles.
So in this article, this is an administrative assistant to the athletic director, and so that would fall under Article 7, and it's going to be a cost driver here. We'll recall that on our first night we unpacked Article 1, and therein lies the request for the Lewiston Middle School part-time athletic director. And we talked about, and I guess it's relevant tonight too, so if you don't mind, I guess I'd just like to say it again, if it's okay with the committee. As we strive to create more after-school opportunities for our learners, on top of what 21st Century already does. Athletics tends to be a draw, whether it be intramural or whether it be interscholastic. And we know that we had some very dedicated folks visit the Harlem Children's Zone, and we know that we're 20 years away from that. But a great start would be to be able to stay organized, but also to work within our capacity and not stretch too thin the folks that we currently have running our athletic programming. Again, whether it be intramural or whether that be interscholastic. I do know that in my my visits with Mr. Fuller, I struggle to understand how he does what he does at this point. And it's more than, for me, I don't know how I would work without Sue Turgeon and my Google Calendar. For Coach Fuller, we're talking district-wide. All of our learners who participate in after-school programming does a tremendous job. I think that this has been something that's been asked for several budget cycles. Having spent time in the schools at the level that I have at this point, this would be something that I wholeheartedly support. And it's not the largest of the cost drivers, but it certainly is something for the committee to consider. I support Mr. Fuller, Jason Fuller, in that high school, as well as athletics throughout the entire district. And so that's why this request made the cut.
Hang on a sec. I'm trying to find the actual salary that you had put in. Where is it in the book? 4 and 4. And then go ahead, Ms. Wright. Thank you.
Wait, people should finish this topic before I go to left field.
Bobby, do you know what it is off the top of your head?
Yes, it is on page 2. Well, hold on. It's down at the very bottom. It says Office of the Principal, LHS. And it says, if you see 240030051180, new LHS Athletic Director Admin Assistant, $33,000.
I know. It's in 4. This is all the new stuff. Thank you. Ms. Wright.
Great. So in this cost driver summary, we've identified that Farwell would be an assistant principal position. Connor's administrative team, could we speak to both those positions and what roles they would be fulfilling that are not currently fulfilled?
I'd be happy to answer that question, Ms. Ray. We recall back in August of 2019, the school committee met, and I asked for the special education supervisor, who was a split position, who was also the assistant principal, to be essentially made full-time. With the 6 classrooms that house now believe it or not, a world-renowned RISE program and the functional life skills program, to have the half-time special education supervisor / half-time assistant principal, it really felt as though we weren't able to serve those children the way that we really needed to. The committee graciously approved the special ed supervisor to become full-time, which therefore made the assistant principal full-time. So now we have a full-time special ed supervisor and a full-time assistant principal. It's been smooth. The students have been served. I've had 0 issues in terms of servicing these learners who are some of our highest need students this year. So knock on wood, that's been great. We do have Assistant Principal April Karen here with us tonight, who may be able to even speak more deeply into what this commitment from the school committee has meant for not only her, but also the learners. April, would you like to come up? Oh, I'm not supposed to invite April. Maybe you should.
It's all good, but thank you.
Questions? First, can I thank you for making that decision to split my role. For a few years, I was both special ed supervisor and assistant principal, and superintendent is correct, and we do house some pretty special students at our school, and I think that they deserved to be represented the way that they should.
So this was, well, it's probably not for you. So this decision made back in August 2019 was a mid-budget, out-of-budget request that we fulfilled, and now we're just instilling it in the budget. Okay, just want to be clear about that. And then, thanks, April. That's super helpful to understand. What have you spent more of your time on? I'm just curious, more than anything.
Proactive strategies, proactive behavioral supports. I'm able to get into the classrooms more, work with my teachers more, work with the students, and developing social emotional learning. I'm available to my staff, students, and families.
So Connor's administrative team, what does that support in our tab 4, and why?
Absolutely, Ms. Ray. So we'll recall that the outgoing administration put together the Connors administrative team, and because I was not part of that, nor should I have been, I was in Vermont. The team was assembled on paper to look similar to what some of our other larger elementary schools look like in terms of a principal and 2 assistant principals. It was probably around, well, we know it was around October that we realized that the admin team, and particularly at Connors, which has our highest percentage of special education students, our highest number of English language learners, which was the largest square footage elementary school in the state of Maine, and the largest overall population, actually has more students than our middle school, which is bursting at the seams. Well, I think that we came to understand that they needed some help. And so the idea on that was to be able to temporarily move the assistant principal who was at Longley at the time. And we know Longley has been part of a reconstruction project, a research-based reconstruction project that we talked about is becoming Impact Academy, where there'll actually be students there who oftentimes choose to be there. There was a talented assistant principal at Longley who we believed could be of assistance over at Connors to help them through what was clearly an understaffed situation in retrospect. So we moved that assistant principal over to Connors in November. He has been there since. However, we do know that you got to pay the piper, and the time will come, and it's coming, where that assistant principal position needs to go back to where it belongs, which is over at Longley, which will be our Impact Academy. They'll need some leadership over there to work under Mr. Langless in order to get that school up and running and then thriving, which means that Connors would advertently I should say, lose an assistant principal that they've been accustomed to having, that has been largely effective on a very large elementary school with the very unique challenges that Connors faces. And so this request is actually asking to add an assistant principal, which would give Connors 3, along with the principal being 1, going into next year, because we do know that we're going to require that borrowed assistant principal from Longley to actually go back. And so the idea here is to staff them the way that had my current admin team had all this information, I don't know, back around February or March, we probably would have recommended this in the first place. So that's what that request is for the Connors admin team.
So when it actually comes through on the budget line, it looks like it's for the Impact Academy AP, is that correct? So it's actually not Article 7, but it has to do with it, is that right?
So in the budget currently, because that assistant principal is located at Connors and the coding is at Connors, I put it in at Impact Academy for the new request, but we can revert back at any point in time. So in reality, what Superintendent Finn just described really is so that it's the administrative team at Connors that really requires that position. But if you look at the Impact Academy line, that number is accurate. That's what we're looking for. It's just because of where that person's located today. Yeah.
So are we starting our parking lot yet, or is that for another time?
We can start it.
I just feel I might have a hard time selling the council on a new assistant principal and new administrative assistant request, just knowing that those requests grow year over year.
So for clarification, you want Impact Academy AP on the parking lot? Okay. We probably should explain the parking lot concept. Yes. Do you want me to do it, or do you want to do it? Okay. So we're going to maintain what we call a parking lot. And so if there's something that concerns you, something that you want to speak more about, you want more information about, just let me know and I'll add it to the list. And then as we go through the process and we get down to where you make determinations as far as what's going to be in the budget and potentially what's out, we'll have dialogue about those parking lot items.
So I guess this is a question for the superintendent. If this budget didn't end up funding one of those two positions, it sounds like what Chief Avery might be describing is that it would be sort of in the purview of the superintendent to decide which role someone was serving in. And if so, could we get some insight into which role someone would be serving in?
Thank you, Mr. Collins. So we know that if this were not supported, that we still have every intention of launching our Impact Academy model. And so that position would rightfully return to Impact Academy. And that would mean that Connors would have the principal, would have 2 assistant principals. And then we would have to become very innovative. And there's nothing wrong with being innovative. But we would be looking at RTI positions that are currently there. Perhaps coming up with a concept of a dean, similar to what McMahon's got. So these are ideas that if this were not supported, at the end of the day, we're not going to let our students go without. We're not going to let our teachers or our administrators go without. So it's certainly not devastating by any means. I think it's a valid ask for, but the priority, Mr. Collins, would be to send that administrator back to where they're funded for and help us launch Impact.
This isn't really a question, it's just more of a comment that, it seems like it's so important for the school committee to be supportive of the new elementary school. So many kids are going to go through there over the next decade, and it just seems like we want to do everything possible to make sure that it's successful and those kids have the supports that they need. So I totally understand why you're making the request.
So out of this whole thing, is it actually 2 new assistant principal positions, or just a shift of 1 and 1 new? That's where it's at. Okay. Yep.
So I was curious about maybe a dean or some other position, maybe not. I'm sure you looked at different models for it, but I also would like the parking lot to reflect looking at more in depth, like what that structure would look like and why another assistant principal rather than somebody like a dean. What would the main roles of that person be, if it's disciplinary or if it's more to do with any kind of support for the principal directly, that kind of thing. But I think it's very, very, very important that the administrator go to Longley where they had originally planned on being, and that this situation is temporary, and that if support is needed, we give it in the most appropriate way. So, Mr. Potman.
All right, I got a couple questions. One, Bobby, last year when we ran the 1.8 million surplus, is there any items in this article that we funded last year that didn't end up going through that turned into the surplus?
That's a loaded question. So I can't pinpoint to you because a fund balance is just that, it's unspent money, right? So it's globally over the entire budget, what we didn't spend helps to support or build a fund balance. So the 1.8 that you're referring to, are you talking about the restatement? That has nothing to do with last year. That has to do with prior years of booking a liability that we decided was it was a very conservative approach, but that through the audit process of 19 we decided didn't need to sit on the books anymore, so we reversed it, and so that's where that $1.8 million came from. It did not come from not spending the money, it came from a restatement on the balance sheet.
So that being said, are there any items presented in this article that that the school committee funded last year that didn't go through that are now coming forward this year?
No, there's nothing in new requests. No, nope.
Second question, on the relocation of the two assistant principals, I'm going to go with the offset is on the 98,000 from ELL budget. Okay, so that's taken away from there. Next one, I'm not clear why we need another assistant principal at Farwell. I need a little more clarification on that.
Turn that over to you, Superintendent Finn.
So I'll go back to August, and we have one principal in August, and we had a half-time assistant principal and a half-time special education supervisor. Now, there were additional classrooms that were added to Farwell, which raised some concern as to one, a half-time assistant principal serving in the same capacity as a half-time special ed supervisor would be able to be effective in that. So having gone in and met with the principal and met with the half-time assistant principal, and then asked the school committee to allow us to make that two different positions. We were able to send Misty over to Farwell to serve as their full-time special education supervisor, and that allowed April to become a full-time assistant principal. So we're not really asking for that to be added. We just are asking for that to be upheld. It was an unbudgeted item. Bobby, you got something?
Yes, it was voted on in August, a unanimous vote that this position would be in the budget.
Okay, so I guess I get the question of why is there an $84,000 increase in the salary line for principal of Farwell?
Sorry. FY20, it's an unbudgeted expense, but I have to carry it into FY21 to show that it's now budgeted. Does that make sense?
So somewhere in our budget, we had these shifts of these jobs that eventually went into the Farwell budget. And then it disappeared this year and we have to add it into a different line.
No. So in FY20, it was not in the budget. So the superintendent came before the school committee and asked for this request as an unbudgeted item, and the school committee at that time voted unanimously to fund that position in an unbudgeted capacity. That was in FY20. So going into FY21, I have to show that now as a funded item, and that's why you're seeing the increase. Because last year, or FY20, it wasn't in there. FY21, it now is. So that's the increase. Does that explain it?
Yeah, I'm getting that. Second piece, the next piece, on salary line for administrators, we got a $204,000 increase. How does that fall within these main drivers, and what's pushing that?
That's the reclass of the 2 APs from Montello and LMS. And then the other, and I want to say, Ron, and I can get you the exact number on this. I think it's a roughly 161,000 for 2 people, and then the remainder of that is contractual increases.
How much was the contractual increase?
Well, it's the difference between whatever the increase is and roughly 161, but I can get you exact numbers if you'd like them.
So with that being said, let's go to the office of the principal salary line on Montello, and I see a $93,000 increase. From what you just said, I'm under the impression that Montello was included in the 2004 line, and now I see a 93,000 increase.
So can you show me where you're looking at that, just so I can stay on?
That would be line 1600 of the
Yes.
office of the principal salaries, Montello.
You're looking at the detail budget. So in that detail budget, it breaks out every single department in each one of our schools. So what you're seeing is that salary, that 93,000, is part of that 200,000. So you have to make sure that when you're looking at the detail, we're very transparent. We tell you exactly what the salary is for each particular cost center. And then when you look at the article summary report, it adds it all together. Does that explain it? Does that make sense to you?
My math isn't adding that up that way.
Because you're not adding in the benefits. You're only looking at the salary.
Okay. Let's go to, jump to the athletic director administrative assistant. I want to know if there's a capability with having an extra person on board, if we'd actually be able to create a revenue line in the rental of facilities and stuff.
The reality is it's possible. With more capacity, we could rent the facilities and make sure we're tracking those things down as accurately as we possibly can. We do have limited facilities, but this person would definitely help coordinate, follow through, and help with the revenue side of things. I make no promises on amounts, but the possibility is there because we have capacity to have someone supervise, someone be the contact, in addition to Jason, who is already running around everywhere else.
I still have to be clear on why the reallocation of the 2 principals from ALL. I'm coming in, I've never really gotten a good feel on why this is happening. Can I get a little bit more on that?
I'd love to share that with you. So the Maine Department of Education mandates an accounting code structure that we have to follow. And so given that we have some new people here and we have a new fresh set of eyes, we've looked at all of the coding, and we actually have some more reallocations that we're going to have to do, but it's part of cleanup. It's part of following that state mandated accounting code structure. And this year we took on these 2 positions. I can tell you there'll probably be some more reallocations to come. It's all in the interest of making sure that our coding is correct.
All right, so it's not a case where there's something going on at a school that we need more support or something to address at a school or something like that.
Absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So you see a $702,000 increase, and you've listed 5 items. What else is missing out of that 702? Because that doesn't add up to the 702. So what else we have out there?
So it does add up to the 702, and I'd be happy to provide a detailed. I can break that down for you at Wednesday's meeting if you'd like. I can give the exact numbers for each one.
You don't know offhand how much the health insurance was,
Ms.
right?
Potvin, she said she could get it for you.
Um,
She doesn't have it right in front of her.
Just ask another question.
She just said she could get it for you for
Right.
Wednesday.
Sure.
So Mr. Potvin had asked a question about a line for facility use. It's my understanding that we don't actually, the school department doesn't have all the control over that as part of rec department city as well. So that I think is a bigger question, and I don't think that the school, to my understanding, I don't think the school has complete control over that. So I think that's a bigger conversation than the budget right now, maybe.
You can- So a piece of that is the fields that are behind the school are property of the city. And so when those fields are rented, the cost drivers largely go to the city. And also part of that, there's a contingency fund to replace the fields of the turf when they just get used up. That's estimated to be about a 10-year window. And so the rental fees that are associated with that go mostly toward maintenance and replacement. Our own facilities, however, we do rent, and that revenue would come into our school department. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, you can ask a question.
I'm just not sure what the difference is between the fields behind the school versus your guys' fields. I guess I don't know which ones are which.
They're all the same. So if it's an outside event, so anything that surrounds the high school is owned by the city. So if there's a rental that happens, that money goes to the city. It's just an account, and the entire account is for replacement costs, roughly 10 years from now, for those fields. We know that's going to be a large sum of money. We don't want to come back to the taxpayers to do that. So the rental that was one of the things we did when we built it. We created this replacement fund to increase revenue. You're looking at gym rentals. And I'll be honest, the high school's pretty booked. We got a full athletic program. The winter, for example, would be very difficult to find more time there to make revenue. Longley, I think there's some flexibility there that you can use. And obviously, there's not a lot. If you go look at the Longley calendar and look at the high school, they're pretty full right now. But there is some flexibility there. You could look at some Sunday events where you can increase some of that revenue as well. And certainly an administrative assistant would help with that.
So on the co-extracurricular section of this, I just had some questions. Field maintenance, we have the school department pays for that, but yet the city does or does not?
All right, so if it's a maintenance request, each of the fields that we use has a percentage base that we're funded. And we're responsible for that maintenance. So if it's, Don Rue Field, the school department, because we use it pretty much 90% of the time, that's our responsibility for any maintenance costs. If it's the tennis courts where the city and the school split it, it's a 50% split, so half those bills are part of our maintenance fees that we are responsible for.
Okay. Oh, I see the tennis court, it says 40%. So the city is 60%? That's on you.
It might be. I'm going off the top of my head. I know it's roughly 50-50, 40%.
Not holding you to it.
Yep.
So I am curious, that comes to the next part with the tennis court maintenance of $22,800. What are we doing to that tennis court?
All right. This is real simple. We have the best tennis facility for any high school in the state of Maine. There's a reason that the state of Maine asks us to host the individual state championships, the state championship every year. We have a facility that's second to none. Unfortunately, the base of it is a little soft, and natural weather, living in Maine, cracks the surface of the courts. If we don't do a regular maintenance, which is a full resurface where we fill all the cracks in, repaint, resurface, those courts will be destroyed very quickly. So it is a roughly every 8 to 10 years that we resurface the entire courts, and it just allows for those courts to longevity-wise maintain. The longer we go right now without doing it, we're in danger. There are some pretty wide cracks that have developed over the last 2 years, and the longer it goes, those cracks start disintegrating, and now we're talking about a $300,000 or $400,000 bill.
And it also says athletic class change, 3,000. What is that? Do we know? Athletic class change.
I'm going to assume this is somewhat of some increases because of the way scheduling has gone in the state of Maine. Different levels have changed, so we're traveling more and doing more at a state level. Instead of being a small geographic area, we may be traveling now to Noble, all the way to Bangor, and that's just based on the size of the state, large schools, and what we're doing to make our schedules work. So that's caused some increase in terms of numbers.
Thank you. So I'm still mulling things over that we already talked about, and I apologize for that. But the structure at McMahon, I see Principal Eliason is here and was wondering if she could speak to the dean thing we were talking about before. I've never heard of that before, so I'd be curious if that's all right.
You talking about McMahon or Connors? Oh, okay, yes. Well, okay.
Do you want? I don't need to. Okay. So we don't have a dean. We have an RTI teacher, and we've had an RTI teacher for a couple of years. I have just in-house kind of restructured how I want to utilize that position to best support students. So that teacher helps me, is also our SEL facilitator, which currently is like a stipend position, and so supports teachers with classroom management and student supports and students on individualized behavior plans. So it took some work, you know what I mean? Yep, and as an administration team, but I know most of our schools have an RTI teacher around behavior as well, so it's all about how you use it.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Thanks.
I was going to say we could talk a little bit more when we get to the parking lot stuff about different positions, so that should be part of the conversation. What do we have currently? What are some options? You know, dean versus RTI versus assistant principal. It would be good for folks to understand those roles. So, okay, oh, I thought you were taking. Oh, thanks. Okay, so are we moving on to the next article, which would be 11? Are we all set to go forward? Okay.
Thank you, sorry. It consists of our crossing guards, and literally it's contractual increases. That's all that's in that article. It's actually not found in tab 11. It's all, your slides are all together. Yeah, next year we'll do that.
Okay, so we're moving on to Article 4, other instruction, summer school, co-curricular, and extracurricular.
So this is another fun, really fun article. We'll talk about the overall increase to this article is $281,283, or a 20.47% increase. The summer school component of that cost driver, and if you remember, Jen Carter was here and she did a presentation on 21st century and the possibility of that grant funding coming to an end. So we did move that $225,000 into this article to make up for that possible loss. And then for the co and extracurricular, Jason, you answered a lot of these questions already, but that has to do with contractual increases. It has to do with ICE, and some of those contractual increases beyond stipends are ICE and pool rental increases, as well as that field and tennis court maintenance that we should be doing.
So I didn't realize I had skipped ahead. So I guess we've completed that section, right? Does anybody else have any questions on that?
this has probably already been gone over, but just could you, somebody refresh me? If the grant funding does come through for 21st Century, what happens?
So if it does come through, and I can't remember when we'll find out. Do you recall? Oh, Jen, you're here. Okay, I didn't even see you.
I was like, are they going to call on me? I'm not sure. I was getting nervous. If we get the grant that we're applying for, continuation grant for the middle and high school, which is $129,135.86, we will learn about that at the end of May. So it will be after this budget process has already ended. So that's a difficult thing with the grant. We have also had the grant at the middle and high school for 12 years. And every time we write the grant, we tell the state of Maine that we are going to create sustainability for this program, and then we don't. So at the last meeting, Mr. Popman asked, I thought, the most brilliant question: why is there so much less money for the middle and high school than there is for the elementary school? My frank answer to that is that past decision makers didn't do the job that they were tasked with of creating that sustainability. And so we're running a program on those continuation funds rather than having the funding that we should have. And the funding that we should have is double what we do have. So if you all fund that 129,000 plus for the middle school in this budget, we're going to bring that program back to where it should be. The additional money is for McMahon, Geiger, and Connors because the grants get cut in year 4 and 5. Connors got cut for the first time last year, and we did not make up the difference. So now my program at Connors is smaller, and it's really hard for us to even meet the grant goals of serving 150 kids within the year. McMahon and Geiger, it's getting cut for the first time this coming year. So if we don't make that up, I'm going to be running a program on a deficit and trying to serve more kids than I can possibly serve. So that might look like, giving an after-school teacher a group of 30 children, or just not meeting my numbers. But either way, it's not going to be effective with less funding.
So if we fund this fully and then we do get the grant money, will this money or the grant money be able to be reallocated within the 21st Century program? It'll get used somewhere in the program.
I'm gonna answer that as before. Now, Jen want it to be reallocated, into our summer school program. Discussion about that.
So I'm a little confused. If we allocate money in this budget specifically for the 21st Century program, and then the school district gets a grant for the 21st Century programs, wouldn't both buckets of money already be allocated to the 21st Century program?
The answer to that is yes. And to Jen's point, we do and probably should have a discussion about sustainability for our summer school, our after school programs. And that would be the logical discussion I would recommend having. But it's all within one article, and you can utilize that funding if the grant funding comes through. My recommendation would be sustainability.
So just for clarification purposes then, when we're allocating money within an article, we're seeing allocations specific to this position or that program, but those are not binding. And so the money can be shifted within the article by the administration. Is that basically a good description of what's going on?
Only up to 5%. So we can't just take a big chunk of money and say, okay, I'm going to move that to, first of all, how do I say this? I'm not, as far as your CFO is concerned, I don't do budget transfers. I believe that the taxpayers vote on an article. That's my platform, and that's the way that it should be. And we try to maintain that. But the statute does say that we can transfer up to 5% between articles.
So I guess, but between articles is one thing. I guess what I'm asking is within an article. So you have a 5% window between articles, but within an article, there could be a lot of different things. What we're hearing in terms of the proposal to use the money for in a particular article is or is not, or is to what degree, I guess, binding on how the money actually ends up getting used.
So if there is additional money left over, let's say we get the grant and that's $225,000, within that same article is co-curricular and extracurricular. It would not be my recommendation to put it there. I'll reiterate, I think that it needs to stay within summer school for that sustainability, because I am quite concerned about us not maintaining this grant because we're not doing our part as far as sustainability. However, within the same article, I would not make that recommendation. I'm just letting you know that if administration, if the superintendent wanted to do a budget transfer between articles, he can.
Can you do it within the article? Within, not, you keep saying between articles, but within that article, anything in that article can be shifted around.
So-
Without us saying yes or no to it, administrators can do it.
Yes, we
Or
can do
if
that.
this one can.
Yes. I don't recommend that, and I choose not to do that.
We're just clarifying what the actual rules are, not that we're going to do that, just what the rules are.
An additional rule that I've come to understand is that if we have an excess of funding, we can return it to taxpayers. Is that correct?
So I'm going to tell you that I don't know our charter, and I would have to research that. I believe the answer is yes, but I don't have anything to cite to tell you that the answer is yes.
I just feel like the last budget presentation Bill did, that came up, and so I think I remember that being true, but not advocating for it, just assessing if it's real or not.
To reiterate, if we get this grant for 21st Century and we fully fund 21st Century, and for some reason we didn't keep this money assigned to these programs, we would be having the same conversation in a year when even more funding drops off, correct? And then we would be revisiting this all over again in 1 year? Okay, just clarify.
Can I say one more thing without you asking me a question? I don't know if that's allowed. Okay, so related to what you're talking about with, like, if we got the grant plus the local funding, what would happen? We have a wait list at every single school, and I came before the school committee a year and a half-ish ago, 2 years ago, with Bill Webster's support and asked for all the money that we would need to remove our wait lists, and that was denied. Every parent I talk to who is on that wait list needs this program. They cry on the phone. It is really hard to explain to a family why their kid didn't get in to our program. And they'll ask me about criteria, which we have, but it's based on so many factors: academic, social, emotional, test scores, all kinds of things, teacher recommendations, administrator recommendations, and we just don't have the spots for even half the kids that want to come to 21st Century at all levels. And my staff are also stretching as far as they can go. So if we had more money, and I mean, I don't make all the top level decisions, but we would use it well to serve our kids and remove those wait lists and make sure that our program became, if we had twice the money, we could have twice the staff, we could have twice the activities, we could have twice the young people, and so forth.
In past presentations, you had given us some data on like the test scores of those who are in 21st century, correct? And those were higher than the average, is that, of our schools? Is that correct?
That is my understanding. And we have looked, it's hard because we look at subgroups. Like, for example, we've looked at all of the students that were invited to come to summer and all of the students who were invited and came, and compared them anonymously, and we see a huge difference. And we measure attendance by 30 days. So in after school, if they come 30 days versus being invited and only coming one day and then dropping out, it's drastically different.
So I think that it would be.
She said, "No, ask a question. You're getting questions. Sorry."
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't even think this is an actual question for you. I just think it's a general statement. I think it would be hard for myself to say we wouldn't want to fund something that is giving us the results that is part of our goals for this district. So I think you're doing a great job.
I just wanted to, I remember from your presentation talking about how there was a certain number of students that you were asked to meet and serve, and you hadn't been able to meet that. I'm guessing that if this funding did work out the way we're hoping it will, that would be much more possible. Okay, that's all I needed to know.
If you'll indulge a question, uh, if the if the school committee fully funds the request as presented, and you get the grants that you're hoping for, what will the impact on the wait lists be, and how much more money would be required to eliminate the wait lists?
So the only grant that we're applying for continuation for this year is the middle and high school. So if we get the grant and you fund it locally, we would be able to double the size of those two programs. If you fund locally what we're requesting for Connors, Geiger, and McMahon, we would be able to sustain our programs at the current level of service with the same number of students. We wouldn't be able to increase because the grants are getting cut. So this will be year 5 coming up for Connors and year 4 coming up for McMahon and Geiger. At the end of next year, we're going to apply for that continuation money for Connors, and it will be a consistent $195,000, where our original grant was $300,000. So ideally, we would be applying for a program that is funded at $300,000 because we didn't make up the difference last year. This year we're running on $225,000. And when we reapply for that continuation money, it looks better if we've sustained the first level of service.
So to put things in perspective, Jen, to your point, our learners have about 10 weeks off over the course of the summer. And some have the resources and have the opportunity to continue what we would call growing dendrites in their brain. And then some don't. And 10 weeks may not seem like that long, but when you put it in perspective with this committee, 10 weeks ago, we had our Saturday retreat. And can you imagine if we didn't speak once since then? Look how far we've come. This committee in you've got a strategic plan that's darn near done. And we've got goals, and now we have a budget that reflects those goals on top of subcommittees that are working hard. I thoroughly enjoy those subcommittees. But this committee has come so far in the last 10 weeks. Can we imagine if we didn't get to learn? And so I say that to you to kind of put that in perspective of our learners who have that large gap, who rely on us to provide that opportunity to grow those dendrites in their brains. And if we can virtually double the size of our learners in the middle and high school, could you imagine what that could do for our goals? When we talk about equity and opportunity for our learners. So just a comment to put things in perspective, that 10 weeks is a very long time.
And I would add, after going to Harlem, which you'll hear more about, one of the biggest investments they made was after school and summer school. And it has paid off big time. And I truly, truly believe that students need to have continuing education opportunities, whether those educational opportunities happen through athletics or they happen through programming like yours or activities in clubs. They need something to do after school that keeps their mind going. And they need something to do during the summer that keeps their mind going. And so some folks are economically okay to do that, and they can fund those resources, and some are not, but they're all our learners, no matter if they're inside our schools or they're not. And they're all members of our community that need to be supported to do good things. So, as you can tell, I'm on board for this, but I just want to emphasize to you that there are other communities that have made this investment and it has paid off. Thanks.
Jen, you may not know these exact numbers, but total out of the total number of students that access summer school, how many of them are actually directly involved with 21st Century, and how many of them are in other programming during the summer?
So that's a good question. One of the reasons that we struggle to meet our numbers for the 30 days for the state requirement is because we put a lot of funding comparatively in this district into summer programs versus after school programs. So over the summer between Connors, Geiger, and McMahon, we had 276 children attend summer school, but our capacity for after school is like 150 kids every day. So that's 100 kids that we just can't serve. They're on our after school wait lists, or maybe they're going to another program in the community. But we have more of a capacity for the summer program, and less of a capacity for the after school program. But I think a majority of those kids, like I was at McMahon today because they had a family event, and I walked into the classroom and the kids rushed me and they were like, "Miss Jen, when does summer program start? Are we going to this field trip again? Are we going to study about this? Because I heard in 4th grade you study about this." And like, they were just so excited. They love the program. And I know we have a lot of kids that love school because we have wonderful schools, but I think the excitement that they express for our program is over and above that, because we get to be creative with the curriculum and really help them dive deep into a topic that they're passionate about. They want to come, and we have a lot of families that will call us and say, "Well, why did my kid go to summer but they can't go to after school?" And then I explain about capacity. And I wish that there were families here to talk to you and tell you their stories. They did come the night that I presented, and I think there was some confusion about public comment on an agenda item versus a non-agenda item, so people didn't stand up and talk. But I have been talking to folks and asking them, like, will you write a letter, or, email Miss Roy and tell her your opinion or your view, because there are a lot of families and kids that want more after school, and that really see the summer program as important. Sorry, sometimes I use a lot of words when I get excited.
Is the summer school program consolidated in one school, or is it split between 3 or 4 schools?
Our summer program for the 3 schools that we serve, the elementary schools through 21st Century, is consolidated at one school, and we started doing that last year to save money, and we saved a lot of money. We have another elementary program at Montello that is not run through 21st Century, so that program is run in its own building, and then we run our middle and high school program together at the middle school, and that serves kids up to grade 9, starting incoming 7th.
How much additional money beyond what's in this budget would be required to give all the kids who want to participate in this the chance to do so?
I mean, when we get the grants, we set a certain number of students that we want to serve with the original $300,000. And so this year, it was Longley and Martell programs, and then they were combined at Connors, and we cut that budget by $75,000, and we didn't put that other $75,000 into the budget. So if we had more money than what we're asking for, we would put that $75,000 back and keep the Geiger McMahon grant just where it is now. If you approve the local funding right now in this budget, that grant will be sustained at its level that we applied for. There would still be kids waiting with that, but.
I'm going to add to that. To your question, it would make a really good, and I'm going to look at Karen, it would be a really fun project to actually break that out and design that and build that out to answer your question fully. So if you can give us some time, we can certainly do that. I think that to Chair Rory, Harlem really, that concept, that model would really expect us to do just that. And I echo everything that you said. We really do need, in my opinion, we really do need to consider our after-school programming.
Just as we're talking about this program, I feel like I've heard the word sustainability thrown out, and I'm just trying to reconcile in my mind, is that sustainability in local funding year over year because that has to be approved year over year, or is there some method by which there could be carry forward designated for 21st century, and what does that maybe look like in our model because it is a worthy program?
So as far as carry forward is concerned, I'd have to look into that as to whether or not that's an allowable, I'll call it a set aside for after school programming. So I'll have to get back to you on that answer. As far as sustainability is concerned, though, I anticipate that if we move more towards when we're talking about poverty and we're really unpacking that and what that means to Lewiston, and we determine that it really is at the school level that we need to expand upon our after-school programming and even going into the evening, sustainability, that definition is going to change. So it really, for today, it's the sustainability definition that Jen has provided us, but I anticipate that definition will change very much depending on what direction we head in, through the poverty work.
I'd just like to, if we're putting things in a parking lot, I'd like to revisit this later around the issue of how much more beyond what's in this budget would be required to make sure every kid could participate who wanted to.
All right, I think that's the end, folks. Unless there's any more questions, I would say anything that you thought of for the parking lot, let Bobby know or Miss Avery know right now. I think though for Wednesday, Mr. Potvin, did you want those numbers from Miss Avery so that we could publicly state them? Okay, so let's make sure that we hit that first. Ms. Parks will be chairing the meeting. Okay, everybody have a good night. Thank you.